At the age of 9, I started to get the bug about music because a friend of a friend had a skiffle band, and I joined the skiffle band, and we rehearsed. We never did a gig, but we made a hell of a noise in this garage, and I played the washboard. That was my gig, and screaming out Lonnie Donegan songs. And then my brother got married and he left the band, and the Warriors kept going. We went to Germany. We actually went on the similar sort of path and played at the Star Club in Hamburg and the Storyville clubs in Munich and Frankfurt. And then I just got tired of them not wanting to rehearse. I was so into rehearsing, I don't know why, I was just mad. We're so lucky to do this job, let's just keep rehearsing. Oh, piss off, John, was basically what they said. The guy who ran it, Jack Barry, we're good friends, and he said, there's a guy, this is about 6 in the evening, he said, there's a guy at the end of the bar, he's called Chris Squire, he's a bass player. Why don't you go and say hello, you know? You might have something in common. So I went over to see him, and that, because I wanted to get going with a band, you know? And he had a band called Mabel Greer's Toy Shop. It's such a long name. So within about a week of rehearsal, we had to say, we have to change the name, man. It's too long. It's a terrible name.
What's that?
And we went out and tested it that day, and we got some incredible sort of, what are you called? Yes. No, but what are you called? Yes. Yeah, but what are you called? You know, so that's good.
Yes.
There was another advert saying, I'm a drummer, I have a Ludwig kit, I'm looking for a progressive band, sort of thing. And we thought, and I've got a car. He had a car, we didn't have a car. He's in the band, I don't care how he plays. He's got a Ludwig kit, he's got a car, he's got to be in the band. It was Bill Bruford. The call came through, John, they need a band at the Speakeasy tonight. Can you do it? And I said, yeah, you know, do we get paid? No. Well, we'll still do it. So we all finished up setting up at the Speakeasy around 10 o'clock to do a show, you know. And of course, people are coming in from far and near to come and see Sly, because nobody had actually told anybody. So Townsend's there, and Keith Emerson comes in, and all these luminaries, you know. I don't know if Paul McCartney was there. A lot of people there that were famous, and I'm setting up the microphone, and, you know. And because they knew me, because I was working in the Shas Club still. Hey, John, what are you doing? I thought, I'm doing a gig tonight. You got us tonight. Sly and the Family Stone didn't come. We're going to play. Well, you better be good. I said, yeah, I know. It's just the way life is. And he started to build these genie towers, light towers, that he could wind up and put on stage, because in those days there wasn't lights. And he created the lights that everybody sees these days. He created all that. He developed all that. I mean, you couldn't get somebody out of the West End to come on tour. So you had to have a creative person like Mike Tate. And he was fantastic. And he's become very, very good at what he does, you know. I remember seeing Steve Howe at the Speakeasy with his band Bodast and thinking, now that's a guitar.
Third album.
I think the Yes album was the first time that we'd actually been given an amount of money to go somewhere and rehearse and write an album. And we all went down to this house in Devon that Steve still lives. I remember we were doing Yours Is No Disgrace. That part comes from a TV show. It was Ebbing of the Ard. The theme is... But anyway, I was listening to it in the band and making a hell of a noise next door in the rehearsal room, which we'd created. And I went in and said, listen to this, bam, bam, bam. And we started doing it. I don't know if we did exactly right, but the idea was there. And then we'd play the theme on top, and that's how you do it. You know, you just pick up things as you're going along. We were working with the producer, Eddie Alford, who was just the best guy. And he worked with us from Time and a Word, the Yes album, Fragile, and Close to the Edge. And he was like one of the band. He was definitely one of the band. He went on tour with us, and we all went crazy together, which was fantastic. We've been to Switzerland and Germany and Italy and France. We weren't well received in France. They didn't like us too much first time. And I said, well, we won't go back there until they want us, which happened about 4 years later. But it was just like, okay, where do we go next? Well, America. oh, never thought of that. That sounds a bit big to me. America? Wow, we're going to go to America? So we got a tour with Jethro Tull, because they were actually pretty big then. They'd had Aqualung as a big record in the States. So they were very well received. And we were very surprised how well organized the business was in America and Canada. I watched Jon Anderson. He's good, you know, and I watched him every night, and he was great. And then I realized what you do, basically, you get your stance on stage, and you tend to do the similar thing every night. It's a sort of routine. It's like theater. Whereas I'd always just go on stage and you do what you can do, you know, and bang some drums or shake some maracas or bang a tambourine and stand there. Most of the time, the feeling that I was surrounded by this music, and it wasn't up to me to project. But when I saw Jon Anderson, it was kind of great, because he was the master, and everybody else was sort of behind him. And I could understand that, you know, and I think, yes, as a band, sort of got it. And then when we went on stage, we all played our part. Chris and Steve came to me and said, look, Tony's hasn't got better in this tour, where we'd all got better, in a way, and we felt like, okay, what are we going to do next? Well, because we had some ideas and musical thoughts. Me and Steve had started writing, and we started writing a lot on the tour. So, I was on the flight home. I remember them coming to me and saying, I think, you know, we're going to need, you know, get Tony to play more keyboards for sound changes, you know, and I was always into that idea. I said, yeah, let's ask him. And he just wasn't, it was like, well, if I have to, yeah, okay. And that wasn't what we wanted. We wanted him to say, oh, I was thinking about that, you know, and I've got this other keyboard, and I've got this thing, and we got all these sounds. Oops. And it was on the tour after we came back, and we toured up north, and we played York or somewhere like that, and we played on the same show as The Strokes. And we saw this young kid with 5 keyboards on stage, and we said, that's the guy. Listen to what he does. And you could hear him do this. He wasn't rocking so much as very classically trained, but we just thought, God, that guy, listen to what he does, and what he would do with Steve, and how he would develop themes, and it just sort of, there's no question. I've always said this because we didn't come from the same town, we weren't family. We were musical brothers, of course. You always, when you work with people, you become like, there's a brotherly energy there, you know, you'll do anything for each other and travel everywhere and play in the rain, except for Steve. He doesn't like playing in the rain. He thinks he's going to die. But you'll do anything, you know, to survive. And, but when you come from a same town, there's a certain family thing that you can't break that tie. We've all come from Newcastle, or we've all come from Manchester, Liverpool. We were all from different parts of England. The edge. We'd had such a big success with Fragile, and Roundabout was a big hit record. You know, managers and agents and record companies saying, can you just do that again, please? And I say, no, don't want to do that again. Because if you try to do it again, you're trying to revisit something. Yes. We just finished recording it, and we're getting ready to go on tour with what I thought was totally different music. So Alan got on the kit, started playing. We went, oh, he played with John Lennon. He played with John Lennon, you know. So he can be in the band. Of course he can. Of course he can. He played on Imagine. What the hell? For a while. It was slightly different. I think with the way Alan played, it was harder, and it was more conducive, I think, to big stage. And the audiences dug the swing of the band, and we felt that swing. Even the old songs felt better because of Alan's sort of power playing. He is a great. We'd actually then sold 2 million records, so we had at least 1 million fans. You know, you always think, you didn't think about it at the time, but there were 1 million people waiting for your next album. And we didn't think about that. I just thought about doing something very damn well progressed. It was like pushing a giant stone monolith up a mountain for about a year, you know. And I thought about it on every level, emotionally, physically, and mentally, and just went crazy because, you know, you've decided to commit yourself to this great idea of doing something different and something very, what you feel is the moment, very powerful. And you can see it being torn apart slowly. But I didn't care personally because I just knew the story because I was a punk. Yeah, we'd all been punks. The Who were the first punks. Jimmy Cagney was a punk, you know, when you just go on stage and just do what you can do. But I just knew that they would all make money and then start spending money on better sounds and better equipment and better, it was just normal. And then the dark side of it just fizzled out anyway because it couldn't survive. But it was a very business-pushed thing, and then we were pushed to one side. And I just said, okay, well, that's great because it makes me want to fight hard. Again, there was that wonderful harmony there. But I think the punk and the business side started to sort of undermine the original concept of the band, which was freedom of music. We were very lucky to have Arma Ertegun as our champion. He let us do anything we wanted to all the way through the 70s, and it was towards the end that people would come to us and say, well, you know, Sex Pistols are selling 3 million records, you're only selling 1 million. You know, I tried to explain that to the record company. They're saying, John, just make a pop song, for God's sake. You know, like wonderful story. The cover is who we were. On the back, we all had dark glasses on. We're all looking in different directions because we were all blind to what we were doing. That was the idea. And the front cover, we threw tomatoes at. Instead of calling it Yes Tor, we call it Yes Tomato. You know, it's just stupid, but simple. And we were just very tired, and you can hear it, I can hear it in the music. We didn't have a real direction in that.
Enough.
I just had enough of being told we weren't selling enough records or we weren't doing the right. I think everybody fell out with each other. Everybody was tired of each other. It happens every 10 years or 8 years. Everybody gets tired of each other, you know. It's only natural because you spend all your time together. You spend so much time working with each other and being in each other's car, in each other's plane, each other's hotel, each other's restaurant, each other, you know, months on end. And you spend more time with the band. I knew the band better than my children. I knew my kids, you know, and that's tough. After a while, you realize that you're not really balancing things very well.
Right.
I had left being told that I was too heavy and I was not letting people breathe. And I said, okay, I never thought about it that way. I thought I was helping. And from that moment, I never got back to that place of telling people what to play or trying to show them what to play or whatever, or show them ideas. I never got back to that place because it's something you just let go of, you know.
And
it was perfect. And then everything was silly, you know, being incredibly commercial and #1 around the world, you know. It's wonderful. It's fantastic, but it's made me realize that there was a new fusion of ideas and sampled music, and everything was very, very well produced now. And you could still get the songs through. And I just thought I'd rejoin the band and then help the band into the next level. And of course, we didn't really push any direction. We just carried on into another album of the similar idea called Big Generator. And it enabled us to move as a band, as a unit, for a period of time.
the group.
Crazy Igor, the crazy Russian. He doesn't burn bridges, he blows them up. He's an amazing player, amazing musician, but definitely hard to. We thought it was a pretty good album, but the record company probably didn't think it was worth spending money on, so, you know, Yes fans bought it, but it was never projected out. Because that's the whole point, you make an album, if the record company don't think it's worth spending money to promote it, they don't promote it. So if people don't know it's available, they won't buy it. Even in America, there wasn't much promotion. And I felt that we were sort of winding down. We were being toured just as a money thing. It wasn't like to let people know, you know, that we're in town and we're playing and come and see the show. They'll be amazed because we thought we were good. You always think you're good, or else you don't do it. You know? So the period with Rick over the last tour of Yes was Rick and Steve, Chris, Alan, myself. It was the original 35 years later tour, you know. And it was really good. I just love it. I just love the fact that Yes had survived and still survives and will always survive. When we do our signing after the show, you get some young kid, 17, 18, he's got his first Yes album, Close to the Edge, and he's been listening to it for 2 months, and where are we from? You know, he wasn't even born. And I'm signing it and saying, you weren't even born, I just love this. And that's part of it, that the music will live on, and there was a lot of love and energy put into everything that Yes ever did. And I think it'll survive, and people will start to appreciate it when the time is right for them. Because I've always loved musical artists that weren't recognized initially, like Sibelius and Chagall the artist, and all these musicians that I love eventually get recognition down the line. But that's the way I am, so I think I'm part of that process. I think people will get into Yes eventually.
So the band was very happy at this point, would you say, in the mid-70s?
It was always sort of very, in this beautiful, as I call it, like a harmonic time, when we were all in very strong harmony with each other. And it's the way it is. Sometimes it's very harmony is there. You don't build it, you don't create it, you don't get it at the shop. It just comes, and that's when we make Close to the Edge. We were so much in harmony, and you and I think one of the great pieces of the band's music, and on stage when we perform it, it's the band understood each other, that we don't make a wrong note, we only develop what we understand. We can be, you have a solo, but you can always evolve the solo by playing it as perfect as possible and adding a few notes here and there, but don't diverse and go into a different key. You know, stay in the same key. Sort of thing. That was the attitude of the band, that we create the structure, you go on stage and perform that structure, and that's when it works. And with the right lighting and the right staging, you create a visual, musical experience. And that's what the band was all about. And you
and I, what were the other great songs in Bonds?
Well, of course, when you're doing, you know, South Side of the Sky and Yours No Disgrace, Astral Traveller, Starship Trooper is one of the great Yes pieces, because you can evolve the piece. It's not too restricted. It's got a possible longer solo at the end, and the band can start, when Chris and Alan start evoking the power of drum bass underneath the soloing and the developing string section of Rick and keyboards and whatever. You're on another planet, you know, it really, and you don't think about, well, we're playing to an audience. No, you're playing this thing, you're playing this music, and eventually you finish it and you, oh yeah, well, cool, you know, peace, yeah, the audience is there having a great time, but we're just going through this doorway, you know.
So it's a spiritual experience for you too?
Yeah,
on stage.
I think that started to happen very strong. I've been reading Hermann Hesse, you know, the Hermann Hesse books, and Journey to the East, Siddhartha. You know, I actually went to see Bill get married, and there was Jamie Muir was there, and Jamie used to work with King Crimson. He was this wild man on stage. I don't know if you ever saw him. He would wear what were sort of fur, sort of shoulder pads and things, and midriff was bare and very low-cut jeans, and he'd stomp around the stage and bang things on the stage and have microphones on the stage as this band was going doing sort of rock jazz sort of music, and this guy was jumping against a wall of metal, and he had it all mic'd up, and it was unbelievable to watch. He became a monk about 2 years after that experience. I never know what happened to him, but I asked him how did he do it, because he was at the wedding of Bill Bruford, and he looked at me and he said, just go and get this book. And it was Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, which took me 2 months to be able to say. But this was an amazing book about spirituality and the road to self-realization. And I knew that was close to the edge of realization, was what the whole idea of that album, because it was Hermann Hesse, and he'd been to the understanding that all religions are the same. They're all interwoven and they're all interlocked. And that was the principle of everything. And
so that really reflected in the music you were developing?
Well, we got to that point. Now, where do we go next? And I would jokingly say, well, we'll put the Bible to music or something like that, you know. And that's when we made that decision, because in reflection, we'd actually then sold 2 million records. So we had at least 1 million fans. You know, you didn't think about it at the time, but there were 1 million people waiting for your next album. And we didn't think about that. I just thought about doing something very damn well progressive. You know, we've been called progressive. Well, let's do something progressive. And that's when we jumped into the Topographic Ocean period, which...
that was the double album, of course.
Double album, 4 20 minutes of music, which were actually 4 30 minutes of music, but you couldn't put 30 minutes on vinyl. It wouldn't stick. It would just fade and get crankly at the end. So we had to edit it all down to 22 minutes each side. And they were based on the Vidas, which is the revealing, the remembering, the ancient, and the ritual of life. It's very, very simple, basic understanding that as we live, everything is revealed. And then as we're living, we remember, eventually as we get older, we remember the ancient and why we're here. And then the ancient, of course, is the ancient that we don't understand and we don't know much about. We're living in local history now anyway, playing this amazing game. And then we move into the ritual of life, and through music, it was always this incredible drum pounding thing that we had to go into. It was like everything that you'd ever dreamed of putting into music, you put it all into this album. And of course, it had some incredible points of confusion, because it was such a big undertaking. It wasn't that we were all on the same page. We weren't. I thought we were. Me and Steve were on the same page. Chris was on the same page. Alan was on the same, Rick wasn't, but eventually Eddie wasn't. And it was like we weren't all on the same page. So there wasn't that elusive harmony. So the album, it in fact, became something that was, at that point in time for the band, a big, wonderful chaos.
Sorry.
No. It was wonderful chaos. It was like, I thought this was it. And then we actually sent tapes to Radio Luxembourg, and it was going to be played live on Luxembourg that night, a week before it was released. And it was going to be played on Luxembourg at 12 o'clock, and we're all sitting around the radio, and they'd sent blank tapes. So I think it was, what was that Canadian DJ? Kid Jensen was putting it on. He's talking about, now this is the new album from Yes, one of our biggest bands in the world, and it's Tales from Topographic Oceans. Well, here it is. Thank you very much. Nothing. And that was basically it.
You hadn't checked the tapes before?
Well, no, somebody taken them over.
Did you get sabotage?
I don't know, but I just know that it wasn't meant to be so amazing. It was meant to be a fight, and that's what it became, an emotional fight, because we went on tour and we played 4 sides and Close to the Edge, and that was the tour. And the fans, sort of came in their thousands, and we're playing 4 sides of an album they haven't heard, plus Close to the Edge. And a lot of them wanted Roundabout, or,
Because you did the Rainbow,
and you and I.
You did the Rainbow, didn't you, John?
Yeah.
Big concert
Yeah.
there.
But it was like pushing a giant stone monolith up a mountain for about a year, And I thought about it on every level, emotionally, physically, and mentally, and just went crazy because you've decided to commit yourself to this great idea of doing something different and something very, what you feel is the moment, very powerful, and you can see it being torn apart slowly but surely. And Rick left the band; he just couldn't perform it. He couldn't. After a year, he'd had enough. I don't blame him because he couldn't lock into where I was. He couldn't lock into the idea. But thankfully, 25 years later, we started performing it again. And it sounds more beautiful than ever. So we started performing the first and the last piece of Revealing and Ritual when we reformed as a band in 95. We started, and I said to the guys, if we get together, we've got to do at least a couple of pieces of Topographic. And Rick said, okay, you're driving me crazy, but I'll do it, And we all, I said, we can edit it down. And Steve said, no way, I won't even touch it unless we play it properly. I said, okay. I was eager to help anybody to make it work, So we performed it, and even in rehearsal, I just knew it was beautiful. And we started performing it around the world 25 years later, and it was amazing to play, and it still is. And I was very frightened because my wife, Jane, I'd just met her and fallen in love. And we're rehearsing and all that, and I didn't want her to hear it because I'd never played her that, because she knew Roundabout and All Good People, a couple of commercial songs. She didn't know what Yes was. And then we met and I fell in love, and I just kept her away from Topographic. And I found her playing it very loud one day, and she said, I just love this music. What were you doing at this time in your life? I said, can you turn it down, please? Because I still can't hear the original. I can't hear it. I don't know why. It's just something about it. It's just hard for me.
You didn't want to play the original album?
Well, I don't like hearing it that much, because I can hear all the reasons it didn't work. But to perform it on stage, and I like the new recordings, of course, and to perform it on stage is such a dream. And it's so good, it's such great music, and you realise, well, thank the gods that 25 years later I'm still alive and still able to perform this music, and there's a crowd out there want to hear it, you know, there's a great audience. And most of the people that come to see the band these days are the ones that really loved it in the first place, if they're still enjoying the band, you know. Because when we were doing that tour, like, I think it was like 10 years ago, we were drawing in 5,000 and 7,000 or 8,000 people. But you knew, these people knew who we were. There was no kidding around. When we were famous in the mid-70s, half of the audience loved us, and the other half thought they loved us, you know, because we were hip, or it was important to love Yes, or something like that.
What were the crowd sizes then in the 70s?
Anything, well, it was regular, about 15, 20, regular sort of 3 or 4 shows at the Madison Square Garden sort of thing. That's 20,000 a show. But you go into this wonderful energy force, and you just played your music, and we moved on from topographic, and then we got...
You had to explain the title, though, didn't you? What topographic oceans actually meant, which was the depth, I suppose, of life.
Well, it was more to do with the idea that, well, I'm working on it still, that we don't know much about why we're here, so much about what the world truly is. Topography is sort of the design of the world and the understanding of the highs and lows and the mountains and so on. That's called topography. And the oceans is still topography because you're in the depths of the... there's not much known about the depths of the oceans and stuff. And I was just into that phrase, tales from... because it's a sort of a contradiction in a way, topographic oceans. The idea that the ley lines, I'm still working on the ley lines, this new music I'm doing.
There are huge mountains under the oceans.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And the ley lines are these crystal streams all around the world. They're called grids. And I was learning about that at that time. You know, I was very into sort of geometry and stuff, and the sacred Rosicrucian and all the what's now become very well known through Da Vinci Code. All that information, I was studying all that